Stephanie of Stephanie Stitches here. Welcome to my channel where together we sew. If you're brand new here, don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below and ring that bell for notifications so you'll know when I go live or post new videos. I typically go live every Saturday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time where we do some sew-alongs or just some quilty chat and have a lot of fun, so I hope you'll check that out. If you're not brand new here, thank you so much for coming by. I love seeing you guys, and I feel like a lot of you have become friends, and your comments are also very encouraging and keep me going, so thank you for that. So today I wanted to do a video about my tips for a beginner quilter. So I've been asked by a lot of people, what are your top tips for a beginner quilter? So I came up with my 8 top tips, and I'm going to talk about those today. Now, if you are a beginner quilter, I do have another video here on my YouTube channel, and I'll link that down below, explaining what a fat quarter is, what a jelly roll is, what tools you need. I go through all the tools, things like that. So this video is not going to be about going through each and every one of those things. I do have that video. This is just going to be some tips. So the first, number 1 tip that I want to talk about is your sewing machine. So whether you have grandmother's hand-me-down sewing machine or you've got a brand new sewing machine out of the box, it doesn't matter what sewing machine you have. You don't have to have one with all the bells and whistles. You don't have to have a brand new one or a fancy one, or even if you do have a fancy one, that's great. But you do need to know how to use it, and it needs to be in good working order. So if you did get a machine out of the box, hopefully you got it from a shop that will teach you how to use it. And if you got a machine as a hand-me-down or got it at a second hand shop or things like that, make sure it's in good working order. And if you don't know how to do that, take it to somebody who can help you, either your grandmother or your aunt, or even a shop that repairs machines that can make sure it's in good working order and give you a few basic tips on how to use it. Those are the most important thing. You don't want to be working on a project and have your machine do something crazy and you don't know what to do with it. So that was my next part of this tip, is know how to troubleshoot your machine. So if you're stitching along and all of a sudden your stitches go crazy, you need to know what's going on, whether that is you need to change your needle, your bobbin maybe is not seated correctly, your tension may be off, things like that. So definitely learn your machine, know that it's in good working order, and know how to fix it. And the other thing, or basic fixing, obviously complicated fixing, you want to take it to a specialist, but the other thing about your sewing machine is know how to clean it. Each machine is different. I've got a couple of mechanical machines, I've got electronic machines. My mechanical machine, which I use most of the time, is a high-speed machine, so I have to clean it fairly regularly. It gets a lot of lint in it and it needs oil, and if I don't give her oil, she doesn't behave for me. But most machines, particularly electronic machines, don't need oil, so I'm not going to do a cleaning video because of that fact, because I don't want you all to see me oiling my machine and think you need to oil yours, because most of them don't need to be oiled. So know how to clean your machine, what you need to do for your machine. And I know there's a lot of videos on YouTube about cleaning your machine and maintaining them. You can find one that has either your model or a similar model to yours, and that will help you. Or again, your local quilt shop that sells and services machines can also help you learn how to do basic maintenance on your machine. So definitely know your machine. That's my number 1 tip. My number 2 tip is an iron. You want to have an iron that's dedicated just for your sewing or quilting. Don't keep the family iron that your husband uses to iron his pants and leaves a credit card in his pocket and then gets plastic stuck to his iron, or that your kids might grab and decide one day that they want to make a grilled cheese sandwich. Definitely try to have your own iron if you can afford it. And you don't need to buy an expensive iron. You can go to Walmart, you can go to Target. I personally have a more expensive iron, but I've been quilting for a really long time, and the iron that I have works for me, but you need to get what works for you. And just make sure that when you get an iron that it gets really, really hot. And I know there's some folks out there that don't like the auto shut off on the iron, some that do. I always recommend an auto shut off because I have 4 children and What if I walk away to solve a problem with one of them and it's on my ironing board and I forget, right? I like that it will shut itself off. Now, some of you might not have that problem. I have a lot of distractions in my home, so I like that. So I always recommend that just in case. But you might not have that problem, so you might not want an auto shut off iron. There's not that many on the market that don't have an auto shut off, but I know they can be found. But I do recommend that just because you might walk away and forget that you left it plugged in, and then you have that peace of mind knowing that you're not going to burn your house down. So I recommend that. And also, the one thing I recommend is when you buy an iron, make sure you read the instructions. If you're somebody who likes to put water in your iron to steam, which I'm not one of those people, and I'll explain that in a minute, make sure if you put water in your iron, it's the right kind of water. Some irons like distilled water. Some irons want tap water, and some irons want bottled water. My iron is recommended. I have an Oliso Pro to either use tap water or bottled water, and it does not want distilled water. So make sure that if you do put water in your iron, that you read the instructions and you pick the correct kind of water, because the wrong water can actually destroy your iron. And also, if you are not going to use your iron for a while, say you're quilting for 2 or 3 days, and then you know you're not going to get to it for a few weeks because you're busy and with work or things with your family or everything coming up, make sure that you empty your iron. So emptying your iron, take it over to the sink, dump as much water as you can get out of the well where you put your water in, and then plug your iron back in and push turn it to the steam and steam, even if you're just steaming your ironing board, until the steam is all gone out of your iron. That'll make your iron last longer. If you leave the water sitting in your iron, it can cause your iron to stress and leak, or you can get those brown spots that you get out of an iron because the water just sits there. So definitely make sure you empty your water if you're somebody who likes to use steam. Now, I don't like to steam. Or I shouldn't say I don't like to put water in my irons, because I have ruined an iron doing that. So if I want to steam, I use a spray bottle and I spray my fabrics with water, and then I use the iron. I don't put the water in the iron. Or I will use, a lot of people use starch. I don't like starch, but that's a personal preference. I know a lot of people love starch. I use Starch Alternative or Best Press to help flatten my fabrics. So those are all things that I don't put in my iron. So that's another alternative to help keep your iron lasting a little bit longer. And also make sure every once in a while that you clean your iron. And there's all kinds of videos out there on how to clean your iron. My favorite way to clean my iron is using a magic eraser, believe it or not. Make sure your iron is completely off, cold. Don't use it when it's hot. Get your magic eraser a little bit wet and then just clean the sole plate of your iron. It comes perfectly clean. Then I use a paper towel with just plain water and wipe the chemical off and then dry it, and it comes out beautifully. So that's my tip for your iron. So tip number 3 is your rotary cutter blades and your needles. So you don't need to have a super expensive rotary cutter, super expensive blades, super expensive needles. But what I will say is that you will get a much better result if you change your rotary blade and your needles in your machine more often. There's nothing more frustrating than spending all kinds of time ironing your fabrics and preparing them, and then you go to cut them and the cuts come out wrong because your blade is catching in the fabric. That can be super frustrating, and I know a lot of us out there do that. I am guilty of that. There's been many times where I'm like, why didn't I change the blade sooner? Because as soon as you change your blade, your rotary cutter goes through that fabric like butter, like a hot knife in butter. And why didn't we change it sooner? So I recommend changing that. It might be even a good idea to change it between each large project. And also your needle. You want to change your sewing machine needle once every 6 to 8 hours. I know that seems like a lot, but needles really don't cost that much for the result you're going to get. I was sewing with a good friend who'd had our machine for a really long time. It was a hand-me-down for her grandmother. and she was having all kinds of trouble. The needle was making all kind of noise going through the fabric. Her stitches were not coming out great, and she said, well, what am I doing wrong? And I looked at everything. Everything looked right. The bobbin was correct. The thread was good. And I said, you know, how long has it been since you changed the needle? And she said, changed the needle? So apparently the needle had never been changed by her, and she'd had this machine for years and years. So it was probably a needle that was in there since she had it from, had received the machine from her grandmother. So make sure you change your needles, because that can make a difference, because after a while they get worn out. They don't poke through the fabric as well, which can cause bad stitches. And also you can get burrs on your needles, which can cause thread breakage. So definitely make sure you change your needle. Particularly between each project, if not every 6 to 8 hours. So a good rule of thumb is like every 5 bobbins, you should change your needle. So the next thing I recommend is tip number 4 is to get yourself a good light. Now, at the beginning of your quilting sewing journey, you might not have a dedicated sewing room. A lot of folks don't, and a lot of folks who've been quilting for 20 years still don't have a quilting room or dedicated space. And that's okay. It's fine. A lot of people sew on their dining room table. A lot of people sew in their living room or spare bedroom or a combination of, and they have to keep moving around. And that's all right. But one thing that does happen if you move around is a lot of times there's not enough light. So I recommend a good portable light. There's a lot of them out there on the market. You can find them at Hobby Lobby, Joann's. Look for coupons. Coupons are good, especially around like the holidays, Black Friday. A good brand is like an OttLite or things like that. There's lots of brands out there. That's just one. I have a little OttLite that has a fan, and that works for me because I get hot flashes. But a portable light that you can sort of move, and maybe the top of it you can manipulate to point it towards your sewing machine or towards your fabric, wherever you need that little extra light, because even the newest best sewing machines don't have, and I've got one that has an LED light. It's supposed to be the brightest. It's not bright. I need more light, but I have old eyes. So maybe that's my problem, but I like a lot of light when I sew, and so I always recommend having a really good light. And like I said, if you don't have a dedicated space, I would get a portable light, or even if you do have a dedicated space, it's not a bad idea to get a portable light, because maybe it's in your way if you put it here today, but tomorrow that wouldn't be in your way. So get a really good light. The next thing I want to talk about, tip number 5, is fabric. Fabric is part of the fun part of quilting. Going into a quilt store, seeing all the beautiful fabric, lots of choices, but when you're a brand new quilter, it can be so overwhelming. And I know that quilters hear all the time of people having these huge stashes, but I recommend for a new quilter, don't go into the fabric store thinking that you need to buy everything that you see that's pretty. I guarantee you that even though, yes, that fabric will disappear, that next year or next season or a few months from now, there's going to be more pretty fabric. I know that a lot of people like to build their stash, and I guarantee you the longer you're a quilter, you will get a stash. But at the very beginning, I recommend only buying what you need for your project. So if you're going to a quilt store and you have a project in mind, I would take your project requirements with you, whether that's a piece of paper it's written down on or the physical pattern that you have, and only buy what you need. I know when I was a beginning quilter, and I know a lot of other quilters who are just like this, that you go in and you get excited about all the pretty things and you buy lots of it. And then you put it aside because you don't have a project for it. So it sits there, and then you pull it out in a couple of years and you go, oh, what was I thinking? Or what was that for? I don't remember. So then you have this fabric that's just an orphan fabric and you don't know what to do with it. So then you destash, you either sell it or give it away to somebody, and you could have saved that money to buy fabrics that were dedicated for a project. So I recommend from the beginning, until you really know what you like, because that's the other thing, is that your taste might change. My taste completely changed from, I look at the things I bought when I first started quilting to the things I buy now, and my taste is completely different. Because a lot of times at the beginning of your journey. Somebody will be there helping you and guiding you, and a lot of times they'll push you towards their taste, and that's okay. They're trying to help you and they're trying to get you started, but your tastes will become your own and they will evolve. So it doesn't make sense to buy a bunch of fabric and sit it on a shelf waiting for the perfect project, and then when you get to the point where you can do those projects, you're like, oh, maybe I didn't like that fabric really. So that's what I recommend. So that brings me to tip number 6, your first project as a beginner. Please seriously think about your very first project. Don't go into this quilting journey thinking my very first thing is going to be a king size quilt. There are some quilters who have done that and they've been successful, but there are more quilters than not that have done that and have not been successful, have spent $300-400 on fabric for a king size quilt and have gotten very frustrated and quit and never quilted again. So what I recommend for a very first project is something small. You want to pick a placemat or a table topper or a table runner, or maybe a baby quilt for a baby coming into your family or a friend. Something small that you can finish, and if you make a mistake on, a serious mistake, it's not such a huge thing if it's not recoverable. You don't want to buy so much fabric for a large project and then you make a big mistake and you have to throw it all away and it's not usable. You will be very frustrated. You will want to quit, I promise you. So please start with a small, manageable project. You will be so much happier, and it'll give you a chance to hone your skills a little bit and then kind of build yourself up. Start with something small, go to a lap quilt, go to a twin quilt, and then if you want to make the big queen or king size quilt, go ahead. But that would be my advice, because if you start with too large of a project, it takes a long time to make a king quilt. Months and months. It's going to go slow, you're going to get frustrated, and like I said, if you make a lot of mistakes, you're going to be upset and you're not going to want to quilt anymore. So we want you to quilt. So definitely start with something small and get bigger. So that's my advice there. My next tip is tip number 7 is join something, whether that's right here on YouTube, joining all these different groups, subscribing to these different groups of people who, there's quilters all over YouTube. There's quilters that will teach beginning, intermediate, advanced, and it's all free for the most part. And there's lots of tips and tricks and free patterns and things like that right here on YouTube. Also on Facebook, there's lots of Facebook groups dedicated to quilting, and a lot of people in these groups are there and are willing to help you. So say you have a project you want to do and you're not that great about picking out fabrics yet. You can show them 5 fabrics and say, hey, I'm going to make this table topper. Do all these fabrics go together? And you'll get all kinds of opinions, but you'll get people say, you know what, those 4 go together, but maybe not that 5th one. And they're there to help you. So definitely tap into that. My other recommendation is join a guild. If you have a local guild by you, quilt guild, join. And I know that can be really difficult for some people. I am a shy introvert myself, and so it took me 2 years to join my local quilt guild because I was too scared and nervous and I didn't want to be judged. But I will tell you, within the first month that I actually decided to take the plunge and go in, I was so happy. The women there are so supportive, so nice, and you bring in projects, they give you their opinion in a nice way, they encourage you to keep going. It's a great group of women, and I'm so happy that I joined. Now, that being said, I have heard people say that the guilds near them aren't great. Well, if you don't like the one near you, find another one. There's lots of guilds out there. There's online guilds, but there's a lot of areas that have a lot of guilds. And if the one right by your home isn't good for you because maybe your personality doesn't fit with those ladies, find another guild. So that's my advice. Keep finding and surround yourself with good people who are willing to help you. There's a lot of us out there that want you to succeed, and we're here to help you. So definitely keep looking. So tip number 8, and this is my last tip, is above all, have fun. Quilting is fun. This is a great hobby, and yes, you will have moments of frustration. You will have moments where you want to throw that project and your machine out the window. But overall, have fun and enjoy the process. And don't compare yourself to other quilters. There's a lot of quilters that have been doing this for 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Don't look at your projects and look at theirs and say, oh, I'm not good enough. Don't do that. I promise you, you will get better. And you won't get better if you compare yourself to other people, because you will always be disappointed. What you need to look for yourself from project to project is that you're making progress. I say this all the time, and I'll say it again. It's important to see progress over perfection. I have made hundreds of quilts in my years of quilting, and I don't consider any one of them perfect. Not one. It's a learning process. I've gone to my local guild, and I've given a speech there, and I've had people come up to me saying, wow, I've been quilting for 30 years and I didn't know that. So you're always learning. This is a journey. I feel like as a quilter, we never stop learning. There's new techniques coming out. There's new rulers and new tools and things that come out to help us make us better. But I don't know one person who considers themselves perfect, and you don't need to be either. All you need to do from project to project is see that you're getting better and that you're making progress. So hope you have fun in this journey. I hope these tips will help you along the way, and I hope to see you again soon. Take care, everybody. Have a wonderful week, and I'll see you on Saturdays with Steph. Bye.